Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on episode 82 of Blowback, Exposing Imperial Decline. Our title for this morning's episode is Elensky's time is running out, and it really seems like the walls are closing in on poor Elensky, and not in the ironic way that the walls were always closing in on Trump.
Yeah, I remember those headlines. I was going to say, not that way.
Like in a real way. Yeah, he's he's getting more and more unhinged. He was lashing out, and he gave us two options. Like there's two possible options that are going on that is causing this really decline on the front lines. Ben, can I throw it to you to articulate those options?
Sure. I wanted to go to another video first, but this one was difficult to find because this was a New York Times, I think over a week ago, a New York Times interview, and the New York Times released segments, help defend our skies, help the F-16s shoot down stuff, protect the border and all that. But his presidential office, president.gov.ua, released this other segment on Saturday, and I only have it. He spoke in Ukrainian. I only have it in that language with big baked in subtitles, but this was the really unhinged part, and the fact that he released it is interesting. So first we'll read, but then there's a Ukrainska Pravda, truth in Ukraine.
Okay, so we got to read these subtitles. Let's read these subtitles.
Yeah, unfortunately, but you can listen to his amazing voice, so at least there's that. Let's have a listen. He's talking about Putin, obviously.
Він неадекватна особа, бо адекватна людина не може піти війною проти іншої держави повномасштабно. Він неадекватна, або він знав, що йому за це нічого не буде, а значить були ті чи інші діалоги з іншими країнами. І про це я навіть не хочу думати, бо це просто тоді це не партнерство, а гра за спиною, і це зрадництво, повне зрадництво.
Full-on betrayal, that's what that is.
Давайте подумаємо все ж таки, що у нього не було домовленостей, а він просто неадекват, який вирішив, що ніхто не буде захищати Україну, і він може захопити повністю нас і знищити.
So he can capture it and destroy it. That's because, this version said he's not a normal person, but actually follow-up came up in Ukraine's Pravda, and it says Putin is unhinged because a sane person cannot launch a full-scale war, or he is either insane or he knew that he would not be punished for this, which means, there's collaborator governments out there. There's traitors in the midst of our partners, and that's the frame of mind he's in. Now that he's running out of troops, the Kharkov offensive has picked up steam. Chasiv Yar is about to fall, and even, the fortifications are not there. And even the recruitment drive is suffering huge setbacks. And he has one basically hope left that, his little peace conference in Switzerland will, I guess, bring him to his knees or show that he's won. And I want to play that little clip with a couple of strategic pauses I want to put in there just for comic relief purposes. So this one's English, and then you guys tell me what you think.
The leaders of the world who are still aside of the global efforts of the Global Peace Summit. To President Biden, the leader of the United States, and to President Xi, the leader of China, we do not want the UN Charter to be burned down just like these books. And I hope you don't want to either. Please show your leadership in advancing the peace.
Advancing the peace?
Real peace.
Real peace. I'm sorry.
Not just a pause between the strikes.
Right, that was the man himself, the man himself. It's already been set June, I think, 15 to 17, where he wants everybody to be there. But he personally invited Joe Biden, who's rather going to a Hollywood fundraiser, and Xi Jinping to attend. To come on, please give this fucking thing a legitimacy. And I'll finish by adding one more thing, which is the EU leaders spoke to Bloomberg, and they came up with this title saying the EU aims to salvage the Ukraine peace conference and get some sort of face-saving outcome. And they're talking about like a Saudi-Russia meeting later in the autumn, maybe November, October, and maybe they can get something there, because even they know this whole fucking thing is a farce. Over to you.
Well,
go ahead, Carlo.
no, it's just briefly. It's interesting, in a larger context, that this meeting in Belarus, that the Russians are also taking along the former president, the last legitimate president of Ukraine, Yanukovych. So that's the you'll get a little glimpse into the future what the Russians intend. On the other side, you have Boris Johnson meeting with Azov Battalion Nazis.
Jesus, yes.
And then you also have Blinken playing his guitar in a Nazi bar where they actually had to take the Nazi regalia off the wall, so it wouldn't be in the back.
You think they should leave it up there, Carlo? Come on.
Yeah,
you
they
take
shouldn't
that
let
off.
them have any nerve, man. Just go all full out Nazi, and that's what they intend.
That's what they call rocking in the free world,
Yeah, rocking, all right. Stoning in the free world. But I think they intend to they see the strength in the Nazis, and I think that's where they're going. I don't know. Maybe I'm out of line there, but I don't know. Just occurred to me.
Well, the whole thing is just that it's all a giant publicity stunt. Because you can't have a peace conference with only one side of a dispute. It's like having a dispute with your neighbor. You're mad that his tree is hanging over your fence or something. You're some kind of legal battle with your neighbor. So you just say, oh, well, I'm going to have, a mediation session, but not have him included, invite all these other invite your auntie and, your
everybody I know
everybody, invite all these other random people who have nothing to do with this feud you're having with your neighbor. Everybody except him, and so you can talk about it and post TikTok videos, dissing him. You make a rap video, dissing on your neighbor. He sucks. He's a loser. So that's all this so-called peace conferences. It's not a real.
But even the drunk auntie or the guy from work is not showing up. That's the thing. I mean, so far, Brazil, South Africa and of course China, we don't know, but they said without Russia, we just won't be there. We don't give a fuck. We still don't know what China's going to do. They might send someone low level just to listen in. But without Russia, it's ridiculous. And even though his 10-point please surrender Russia has gone down to 3 points, trying to get whoever can please agree at least to these 3. Very, very desperate. Yeah. But I do like the.
Yeah, no, it just seems so pointless. Why are they even convening it? I mean, is it going to be where he begs for more money? Is he just want to feel better? Is he going to work on where he's going to retire? What country is going to what are they going to be doing there? It does seem pointless, and I think didn't China say they had no interest in participating if Russia isn't going to be there?
They're diplomatic. They say of course, they support peace talks with Russia and Ukraine equally represented. That's kind of the official Chinese line.
The desperation of Zelensky, he sees the handwriting on the wall. He sees that the West is moving on, that their project Ukraine did not go how they wanted. And they're okay with that. They're going to deal with it. They're going to make the best of it, which is pretty bad. It's not going to be good for Zelensky, but they're going to go ahead and pivot. They're going to pivot to Taiwan and the South China Sea. Yes, and I'm going to steal everybody's thunder, but the new weapons, the good weapons, aren't going to Ukraine. They're going to go to Taiwan. So if it's so obvious that. Poor Zelensky is on the outs, and that's why he's desperately begging for China and Biden to come and help him. So this is the new he was sworn in recently. This is the new Taiwanese government, provincial government, I might add. His first name is Lai
Ching-te, I think. He's not Fat Man Jimmy Lai. He's Lai Ching-te, just President Lai. It's fine, but I don't know if this is more cringeworthy than Yoon, the South Korean guy, singing, American Pie somewhere in the White House or in official buildings. It's just that's how ridiculous it is. You guys are Americans. I don't know this guy. He's Michael McCall, apparently a Texas Republican. Everybody's Republican in Texas, right? But he's also head of the Foreign Affairs Committee. And China did this. It's over now, but a full fucking blockade of the island and told America, stop this stupidity. And basically all the Western headlines were in defiance of Chinese warnings. We stand with Lai. We stand with Taiwanese democracy and all that. And they sent this, what they call a bipartisan, lawmaker committee, which is always, that's US policy, as in if you got Dems and Republicans in there. Scary shit that they're doing, but that is what's happening.
So I think the impetus behind China's blockade of Taiwan was it was like his inauguration speech. His inauguration speech was very volatile and,
fully separatist. Yeah. Like unacceptable.
And so it's his rhetoric has really got China angry. We're going to see how that plays out. And again, I have faith in China to moderate and to manage its red lines and that conflict, in the best interest of everyone. But I don't know. I don't know at what point they're going to say enough's enough. And I'm a little surprised at their strong rhetoric. But does it mean anything? We'll find out.
Last time it didn't. I mean, they were doing this game, after the
Pelosi's
revolution, and you had the State Department had this whole "who lost China" war. It was this internal feud that happened in the U.S. State Department after White China fell. And they were upset about that, because White China was their boy in that corner, and then through the 1960s up until Nixon, when Nixon warmed up relations, you had this big, you had that big feud between China and USA, and it was the same game that's now. I don't think it ever got to like Cuban Missile Crisis levels in the Cold War, and I don't think it's going to now either, because you had this whole, China would issue a warning and say, yes, this is our red line, and then the USA would be like that kid when you have your kids in the back seat when you're driving your car, and then it's like, Mom, he's touching me. And it's like, no, I'm not touching you. And that game. Yes, every parent knows that. Kids doing it. It's kind of what China, that's why I would compare. It's not like with Ukraine, where it actually did turn to bloodshed in 2014. It's just they're doing this big kind of, I don't even know what to call this. It's just a feud at this point, and it's not the first time China and the USA have had this feud.
What is the U.S. hoping from their side is they're going to get out of putting these weapons, putting their compliant comprador, assets in charge in the government? Like, what is the U.S. hoping to get out of doing all that? To me, it's like it seems like they're preparing for a war. They're getting ready to, antagonize China to the point that China is going to invade, and that's kind of what they're after. On the other hand, if they wanted to do that, they could have done that already. So maybe they have a longer term plan, like a couple more years before they're really ready for, to cross that line before China actually does something militarily. I don't know. I mean,
Billy Bob, remember the Ukraine experience, right?
Yeah.
The actual military side of the war is a sideshow. It was supposed to last for some time, but the sanctions were supposed to dismember Russia. They were supposed to be a Moscow Maidan. Putin's out. It's done. We can colonize it. We can tear it into pieces. And I have a feeling that people like Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Blinken, with the one-track mind, they think they can do that to China. I mean, there were some clues. Janet Yellen appeared on some fucking Italian island that I forgot, where the G7 foreign ministers meeting was, and half of it was, we're gonna confiscate those Russian assets, at least use the profits of the Russian assets to do a huge borrowing of 50 billion, and then sort of the future earnings of that can be the I don't even know how these fucking loans work, but it's ridiculous. But the other side was, we want this wall of resistance against the Chinese, what do they call it? The excess capacity or some overcapacity, and a war against the Chinese subsidies. In the meantime, the financial press is writing envious shit. Like, how did they get this far ahead of us? What the hell is going on? But I think there's the thinking, this is a code for sanctioning everything.
How? Okay. So, but again, I mean, so they're trying to find a justification for the mother of all sanctions. Is that what you think they're up to?
Yeah, I think so. And then they can grab whatever, semiconductor industry is still left in Taiwan, say, you're American now.
As well as, marshal their propaganda apparatus into just demonizing China and telling them that they're bloodthirsty maniacs worse than Putin kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, because ostensibly it's going to be them moving on Taiwan that is the justification for these sanctions, and then them moving on Taiwan is also going to be, of course, just seized upon by the propaganda apparatus just to demonize China, in the same way they tried to demonize Russia and Putin. I don't know. I mean, that could be.
Sorry.
I was going to say, if the USA really wanted to paint China into a corner, they could put weapons on Taiwan that China could not ignore.
No.
Right now the Taiwanese defense forces are still driving around M60s. M60s, like this crap you see in 1950s movies in the Spanish army, like in Patton and that, so it's not. It is at this point a defense force. It doesn't, as far as I can tell, have any kind of offensive capabilities. There's nothing preventing China from just ignoring it. So, if the USA, that's why I don't buy this idea that USA is looking for a real hot conflict with China, because they could do more than they have been. And of course, Billy Bob, you asked how does Biden, how does Blinken and how they'll them benefit? Well, they benefit by looking tough, because as long as China doesn't do anything, they can say, look, we're deterring China. We're
standing with freedom and democracy. They're doing that right now.
There's no cost to looking tough.
Don't forget, like however many NATO armies and resources are sort of in Ukraine fighting Russia. The same is true for Taiwan, because the Philippines is fully on board, South Korea, Japan is fully on board, like increasingly, and that's the plan. I don't know why these compradors don't think, but yeah, they're going to be the ones on the hot seat until they're tossed away, just like Ukraine.
Yes, especially Japan. Especially Japan. I agree with Ian.
I think they're the ones who's stupid enough.
There's no reverse Cuban Missile Crisis on Taiwan, and the Uyghur situation has been died down and pretty much exposed for the kind of Western propaganda it is. And the Hong Kong protesters have now all gone to the mainland, because the mainland is cooking. That's wonderful. They realize, what were they protesting against? They're hedonists. They're just sucking it up. But it reminds me so much of the way this Chinese situation economically reminds me so much of the way the U.S. treated Japan in the 80s and a bit before that. Japan was buying up all this U.S. property. They were a booming economy, and then in 1996 there was a total collapse. And I don't know enough about it, but my suspicion is that the Japanese economy collapsed at that time. That collapse was partially due to U.S. actions behind the scenes.
Almost fully.
Sure.
They teach the Plaza Accords at Japanese schools. They were the leaders in robotics, household electronics, and the cheap, affordable cars, just like China is now. And the Plaza Accords were written by the U.S. basically to neuter that. Just neuter it.
It was the world's second largest economy for a minute there.
Yeah. So.
I watched a lot of Godzilla movies, the Japanese Godzilla movies, like in the late 1980s, early 1990s, and they're all very, jingoistic. They're like, oh yes, in the future, Japan is, the world power. They were very, very, I'd say even cocky. And actually, even American movies from the same, I rewatched RoboCop 3. You've seen those movies, and I was so funny to me, because I watched it, and it has the Japanese guy on his television screen, shouting at the American businessmen. the scary, fake Japanese. It's just like, oh my gosh, Japan was the yellow menace of the 1990s. I like completely forgot about that. It was what China is now. It's just the scary Asian baddies. Yeah.
That's the Capitol Hill. Not many people remember this, but I thought I'd bring it to illustrate.
Oh, that's
point.
crazy. It just shows you how they develop these PR narratives and sell them to people, and everybody just gets on the same page. And it's really unrelated to whatever their narrative is. There's reasons for it that are not, articulated in the narrative itself. But so they definitely took the legs out from under Japan's economy, no doubt about it. And they would very much like to do the same thing to China.
And they think they can.
Yeah, and like Ian made a great point earlier. It's like they could have they can do this thing whenever they want. So I think there's a time frame. I think they're rolling it out, and I think they have their own timetable. But when we try and understand why it hasn't happened already, it's just a process, I think. And as the weeks and months go by, we're going to see more and more of it. But it's really ramping up now. This whole, it started with a word that they changed. So what was the first word? They're going to contain. So containment was not politically correct. They had to change it from containment, and then they used another word temporarily, and now they're on to excessive production or something like that. So
overcapacity, that's the way it should be etched on and may the day not come for another 100 years on Xi Jinping's grave, because it's the greatest misnomer in the world, Chinese overcapacity.
Yes, they were specifically accusing China of dumping products onto Western markets, and it's of course it's exaggerated, because if you look at the actual statistics of a small minority of Chinese manufacturing actually goes to foreign markets. It's something like 12 to 15%.
That's what they say. Meanwhile, BMW, Volkswagen, like 8 out of 10 cars go to the Chinese market. That's exactly what Yellen describes. Just not the right person, not the right.
But for the last several decades, they've pushed this competition. Let's just compete, and competition is good, because so once they start losing the competition, then the narrative changes, right? And now it's like, well, they're cheating. China's cheating because they're beating us, and because they're cheating, we have to. At the same time, you also have the think tank saying, "Hey, we're losing this competition. We got to start behaving more like China." And the government has to get more involved in the market, which is again just a total 180-degree turn from what they've been preaching, this free market nonsense.
Let me show you, just to illustrate this point, 2 articles. One is the New York Times came out with this piece, and it's serious because they had to employ 3 idiots to write about it. And how did China pull so far ahead of us in industrial policy? And right there, the second sentence is, we are trying to catch up to a rival skilled in using all the levers of government and bank. Of course, then there's the obligatory banking to dominate the global manufacturing scene. So that's the New York Times sort of.
We didn't even prepare that. I had said that extemporaneously, and bam, Ben was right there with that graphic.
Thank you. I had that in the back of my mind, and this is something that's a couple of days old, May 23. So 5 days old. But I wanted to bring this in because this is astonishing to me. You guys know the name. I may have mentioned this at the last show. Elbridge Colby. He's the guy who, I don't know what the State Department level or defense, but he did the 2018 sort of national defense plan. That guy, serious guy. That guy wrote this piece, his only piece, on the Financial Times of London. It went to other places as well. But right on the second, this does not mean we're abandoning the US allies in Europe, But we really should focus on China because we have a limited. I don't know if I'm going to find it, but we have a limited military capacity.
And I mean, that's what Zelensky is seeing this handwriting on the wall, he's realizing that he's going to be thrown under the bus.
Yeah.
And it's got to suck to be him. So you couldn't find the quote.
Unfortunately, the quotes I couldn't find, but I did find another article that came out on Sky News, which is so amazing, which is about him losing his PR luster, basically. So the title is Zelensky's relying on his TV charisma, but the photo op no longer has the currency it one had in the US because, Biden's going to Hollywood to do some fundraising instead of showing up for his peace summit. So he knows he can't directly appeal to the US. That's why he's trying to go global with this. Come on, people, someone out there still left. And that's why he's going place to place. Spain, I think he's in Belgium now. Then he's going to Portugal next. He's signing these bilateral, like 10-year security agreements and getting 1 billion here and 1 billion there. I mean, he's secured. And all of the Ukraine headlines, I'm just going to quickly tell you this. In Spain, like something around the 1 billion agreement, which includes 12 Patriot missiles, not the systems, not even the launchers, just the interceptor missiles, and 19 used Leopard 2s, the German tanks that already got pretty badly burnt in the field. But that's what they're promoting as, look, we still have friends.
That's the newest game changer, Ben. That's the game changer.
They've both been already used. But, okay, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what the next game changer is.
Yeah, 19 refurbished Leopard tanks.
Well, I mean,
go ahead, Ian.
Yeah, what Zelensky's dealing with. I mean, I was saying this 2 years ago. I mean, I was saying this 6 months into the SMO. I mean, what Zelensky's problem is message fatigue. I mean, that's a problem with any marketing campaign. You know, your audience will just get tired of hearing your message every day. It's like seeing the same advertisement for, a sporting goods store every day. You just get tired. It's like, I'm tired of hearing this, or when you're watching YouTube or you're on Facebook, you see the same, for some reason, it'll just play the same ad like 4 or 5 times in a row. Like it doesn't cycle through for whatever reason. So you just keep saying the same commercial. And you're like, oh my God, I've seen this same commercial 10 times. So you just start tuning it out. It's just like, I'm sick of this brand that they keep shoving in my face. And I think that's the problem with the Ukraine brand. It was new and shiny in February and March and April of 2022. And then, it's just people got tired of it, especially Americans. I think Ben has mentioned this before, but Europeans are as hysterical as ever about it. But, Americans
they're scared. European leaders, the European people exactly like you don't give a fuck, except for the wildly Western media sanitized brain, so soft brains like to the west of us. But most people don't give a fuck about the whole thing. But the leaders are scared. They know this hot potato has fallen in their lap, and America is saying, that's yours now. Zelensky, his black hole of an economy, the losing war, that's not ours anymore. That's why I think it was December, so a couple of months ago, Stoltenberg wanted to sort of Trump-proof the whole Ukraine aid situation, which is like committing to $50 or $100 billion over 5 years or something that nobody can change or something like that. The Europeans are saying, hold on. We feel like we're on the hook for this. What the fuck is going on? It doesn't stop the Chihuahuas. I'll show you just a couple of clips, like first starting with Stoltenberg, who uses, Annalena 360's argument still to this day to argue for something which I think has already happened, but check this out.
I believe that when we have delivered weapons to Ukraine, it's actually not ours anymore, it's Ukrainians. And as I've said, they have the right to self-defense. And the right of self-defense includes also hitting legitimate military targets outside Ukraine and also in Russia, which are, air bases which Russia uses to attack.
Yeah, ridiculous, because ATACMS, these missiles, the 300-kilometer range, has already been used. This is just the media spin of it. Now they're trying to do this. Landsbergis is doing the same, which I think I'll skip because it's ridiculous. But we can go straight to Landsbergis is the foreign minister of Lithuania, one of my favorite little villages that pretends to be a country. And Kaja Kallas is my favorite prime minister. And this would have been the secondary title of the show because she's still in the... I mean, last time we met, she talked about breaking Russia down into smaller states would be a good thing. Now check out where she is mentally at this moment in time.
Ukraine has to win the war, and Russia must understand they lost. This is our plan A, B, and C. Words and sanctions are important, but not enough. Ukraine needs weapons, ammunition, training. It also needs financial and economic support, and it needs it now. It is our role and duty not only to continue, but increase our support to Ukraine on all fronts.
I mean, that's like a betting person. What do you call it? That's doubling down on a losing hand, isn't it? That's
what they
is.
really need is for her to go to the front and show them how it's done.
That's
Or
right.
send the 3 people in the Lithuanian armed forces. Who cares?
What was that lady's name and title?
She's Kaja Kallas. She is the president of Lithuania. Yeah, or prime minister. I don't
kidding.
know which one they have.
So
Her English is pretty good for the president of Lithuania. That's interesting.
Well, Europeans all
studied at
talk
Harvard.
in English to each other. It seems like it's their favorite. They like English more than their own language.
It's just as interesting as the perfect French of the president of Georgia.
Georgia, yes, where today is the big deciding vote taking place. I mean, yesterday the parliament undid the veto that the president did, saying we can override that. And today it's all up in arms in the streets and this security in parliament. And now we all wait for this fucking freak show to end.
Well, what time
That's
is it over there? Isn't it like 8 p.m. or?
It should be similar to us. So
Mhm.
maybe.
7 or 8 p.m. Yes.
So it still hasn't. We don't have any breaking news.
No, I didn't check before the show. Unfortunately, the last time I checked was the morning, and we were all waiting. Sorry.
Yeah,
They
no
overdid.
problem.
That's I think the most recent news from that debacle is that they overdid. They overruled the president's veto.
I do like one fact, though,
Good.
that there was this title, an op-ed, an opinion piece by an opposition leader, but not the president. By the way, another Salome, I just don't want to butcher the nice Georgian name, who, again, 40 years in the US, in US institutions and NGOs, and then she came back. And she had this op-ed in Project Syndicate and republished by the Kiev Post about how this vote in Georgia is about the world. And there was a whole lot of Ukraine in there for some reason. We don't know why, but the protesters also have at least 2, sometimes 3 flags. Very
Imagine how reinvigorated the West would be if Georgia opened up another front against Russia. I mean, it would be a wet dream come true, and that would be a game changer. And it would just revive all the funding, and the fatigue would go away immediately. It is so important for them, and you can see you can feel the rage when Georgia is doing the right thing and saying, no, we're not going to be the next Ukraine, you stupid motherfuckers. But
I can actually do a proper citation now of, this is a name I probably can get right. The parliament leader, like the Duma speaker, Volodin, or someone like that, called Papuashvili, told, media outlets picked this up in a press conference, that certain friends and foes want Georgia to send troops to Ukraine. That is the direct quote from the parliamentary leader of Georgia. Certain friends and foes want us to do that, interestingly.
Well, I mean, you can count on Georgia to balkanize Russia because they were so successful in South Ossetia against the Russian troops. It took the Russians I think 2 days, some people say 6 days, to just utterly crush the Georgian military. So good move, Georgia. You really,
Chechnya put up a really good fight compared to these guys.
yeah.
Well,
Georgians are more lovers than fighters, It's just...
There's a famous image of Saakashvili, whoever was the Comprador puppet that the U.S.
He's in jail now, isn't he?
Yeah, Saakashvili.
Yeah, he was a snake oil salesman. He's a fraudster, and nobody likes him anywhere. He was chased out of Georgia. He's been chased out of Ukraine.
He went to Ukraine.
He was in both places. Yeah, that's what's amazing.
But there's a great image of him at his presidential desk, literally eating his tie because he's not sure the Russian tanks are going to stop, and he's thinking they're going to roll right into Tbilisi or whatever the name of the capital city is. Tbilisi. And it's just emblematic of the U.S. Gets these people to do these insane, crazy things, and then takes the rug right out from under them and leaves them hanging. And like, when is the fucking world gonna figure this out?
I wish I could have been faster, and I wish I had better quality, but I had to find that one.
To the credit,
Yes.
briefly, to the credit of the Georgian people, the vast majority are not protesting this law. So,
who do you think he's on the phone with? Like, who do you think he's probably talking to? A very low-level person in the U.S. He's trying to go higher up on the chain, and they're not letting him. They're just like, well, we don't know. It's iconic. But
Probably the equivalent of today's Sullivan or Blinken, someone like that. Although no, they're higher up.
that's the
He
sign
could be
of
talking to
Sullivan.
W. Bush himself.
He was eating his
to-
tie. And it brings us to the question of corruption, too. I mean, obviously, Ukraine corruption, even in the Western press, has come to light. The dragon's teeth lying in a pile in the middle of a field, just sit there to defend Kharkiv, is a pretty powerful image, and it's been shown even on CNN. It's been shown that image. So
that's remarkable too. But the fully Banderite press, the Kiev Independent, Kiev Post, the New Voice of Ukraine, they're running one article after another saying, "Wow, there's huge corruption here. People actually fled or something like that." Let me read you just a couple of these, like. Demonstration fortification in Kharkov Oblast was basically there for officials to take photos. It wasn't properly built. This is the New Voice of Ukraine, I mean, there's a whole lot of this shit coming. People under investigation saying it was our incompetence. Our soldiers basically ran away. A lot of this is unraveling, but at the local media level as well, also in the West.
And I think that's because the West sees the Nazis, let's get down to it, the Banderite Nazis, as really the only people with the fortitude to take on the Russians. And somehow,
they're dead. Mostly.
Yeah, I know they're mostly dead. Though they seem to show up with Boris Johnson.
The captured Ukrainian POWs are explaining that it's just a pipeline from the grocery store to the front line, and then it takes like 3 days. It's kind of incredible.
And then this comes from 3 Ukrainian soldiers civilians turned soldiers, exactly the same way, by press gangs who ran to Hungary. And Tények, which is a government news outlet, it means facts, interviewed these 3 guys. And then the number came out. How long do you think they live? You might have already read this.
3 hours.
You already read it. That's the life expectancy on the front lines for these
3 hours.
People. I'm just thinking, not a Banderite. There's a lot of people who are not Banderites in Ukraine. They took my dad, my brothers, all of that, and now I'm having to stay at home or put on wigs to get anywhere, and you can see empty streets, empty. I'm having, in this sort of role, a huge amount of resentment towards the Kiev government currently, and I'm just wondering if there is hope for. If Russia is calculating on something to happen like that. I mean, no wonder Zelensky doesn't want to stay at home for long. He's rather plane hopping country to country.
Well, fortunately, there's not a lot of precedent for in scenarios like this for the government just collapsing, like in World War II. There wasn't much left of Italy when Mussolini was toppled. Finally, Germany
upside
itself,
down.
Yes, Germany itself just shrank until it's pretty much Hitler's bunker and not much else left. I mean, there's really no territory left when Germany did not collapse in World War II, just shrank until there's nothing left. So I'm not.
They didn't do this kind of stupidity until the Ardennes battle. That's what we call it. I think you call it the Battle of the Bulge, where the children took part. Where we're absolutely out of people, and the Hitlerjugend, the kids were sent in.
Well, it's hard to say how desperate it is for manpower. It doesn't look good. But
that's all right. Before he was deposed, we had I'm blanking on the previous defense minister in Ukraine. The guy who got the gift gun from Zelensky.
Oh yes.
Current one is Sirsky. Zaluzhny, right?
Zaluzhny, yes.
When there was first talk, he was still in power. First talk about this conscription law. He said, "Well, we want 500,000. 500,000 people is what we need." Currently, in the Ukraine news, it's about maybe we can get 100 to 150,000 just to patch in basically the holes in the front line. That's how bad it is. They actually say these things in the Kiev
Mhm.
Post and places like this.
And
And
the
that's
other,
that,
oh,
yeah.
sorry. The
So
other
that's
difference-
why
I'm sorry, Ben.
I'm sorry that I couldn't finish.
I don't
in
mean
time,
to talk over you.
No,
Go
no
ahead.
worries. But that's why these idiots, Latvia and places like this, are talking about sending in some troops, as if that amount of manpower would change anything.
Well, there's a website. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that in
I'll bring it
Italy
up. I think I know what you mean.
there was a strong internal Italian resistance to Mussolini. So, and that doesn't exist in Ukraine right now. Also, when you talk about conscription, it looks like Sunak wants to lose the election coming up on July 4th, ironically, because he's backing conscription in Britain for British youth. So I just thought I'd throw that out.
Yes.
Ian.
Yes, and you watched George Galloway, who is an MP for the Workers' Party, and he said, "What happens if people resist? Are you actually going to lock them down?" And there's actually talk that there's going to be maybe fines, penalties. We're not going to rule out, if young people don't want to serve in the army. Ian, you mentioned the website. I was wondering where you want to go with this. I want to find out if I am a mind reader.
Right here, drop. It's called War Tears, and I'm going to drop it in the chat for us.
Okay, I'll bring it up, but then, sorry, then I'll show what I had in mind. I thought maybe you were going in this direction.
Well, so what War Tears is it keeps it has a mathematical model on losses and current numbers of the armed forces of Ukraine.
Then we were thinking along the same lines.
Yeah, yes. So that's the link to their mathematical model in English.
500,000 Russians, by the way, 500,000 Russians.
Yes, apparently, according to the Ukrainian sources, we are at 500,000 casualties on the Russian side. I'll show you something else afterwards, but you sent me this website.
Yeah, so if you scroll down, you'll see this is just explaining their model, but basically this is their estimate of, and it's as of now around 509,000 retrievable losses. And what's interesting about it is it's got, they also try to project what they think the current strength of the Ukrainian armed forces is on that bottom graph. And right now they're estimating at less than 300,000, which is interesting because it's a lot less than what Elensky claimed, because he was claiming 600,000. And these guys are saying it might be 300,000 or less, which does suggest that.
Don't forget 1,300 kilometers of front line. Yes,
so we really are in kind of a reverse of autumn 2022, when there was that kind of 2 or 3 to 1 numerical advantage in Ukraine's favor. Now it seems like it's reversed, and now they're in that same situation with Russia expanding the front in Kharkiv, ironically, the same region, and Ukraine having that choice of, do we give up territory that they really can't give up, because that'll roll up the whole front. They can't walk away from the second largest city. They just can't. But they don't really have much in the way of reserves left. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out in the upcoming months.
But the Baltics have warned any breakthrough, and they're going to send their troops in.
Jesus, those people, they knew there's something needs to happen to that place. That's all I'll say. But on the other side, we were thinking along the same lines, because the biggest copium, I think Zelensky said in an interview that the Russian casualties are 8 times higher. 8 times. That's the number he uses. And there's one place that, most people refer to as having a proper methodology, which is Media Zona, like a British cooperation with its opposition. So maybe based in Lithuania or something like that. It's people who hate Russia who do this, but they do it properly. And, this is, of course, the height of huge casualties at the beginning of 2023. And it's been going pretty steadily down all the way until today. And what they do is they check out everything that's visible in videos. They check out all the obituaries in local newspapers, anything that's actually verifiable. And they don't think that the Russians are having huge losses at all. But that brings me, if you want to transition, but we can talk about this for a while more if you want to. All right, the news that scared me the most this weekend, Saturday and Sunday, the 2 strikes. Not sure the second one's confirmed, but the first one had videos and satellite footage, which are striking deep inside Russia. Nothing that's even remotely connected to this war, like early warning ICBM, nuclear warning radars. These over the bend, over the horizon, like 6,000 kilometer sight. They don't even see Ukraine. Those kinds of shit. they're attacking those with drones, and they boasted recently that the second strike was like either 13 or 1,500 kilometers from the border of Ukraine, which I don't know how exactly they did that. It might just be we need some PR, but that's a concerning thing if someone here wants Russia to be blind towards long-range nuclear threats. That's the one thing that kind of what's going on here.
Yeah,
Well,
so
it
they're
is.
attacking. Yeah, go ahead, Ian. You could probably explain better.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily because I think they're really picking the most alarming targets they can, because no country wants to be blind to or even have limited visibility on early warning of a nuclear strike. So I think they're picking the scariest targets they can. I'm sure at least some of these long range strikes are being launched from within Russia.
Yeah,
itself,
they have to be. It's too far.
It's too far. Yes, because you can get somebody and get some assets into the country, or have people who sympathize with you in Russia who can, put together a drone or smuggle in a drone and launch it closer to what they're intending to hit. So I do think it's more of them. They're going to resort more and more to tactics like that as conventional war in Ukraine and in Donbass itself deteriorates.
So you think, and I really want to agree that it's like to be outrageous. It's a PR. It's to be in focus. That's all it is.
To be in focus, or to just hit, because it is. To say it's trivial, it's not. Of course, it's not trivial to Russia. Repairing those cannot be easy. And
the Ministry of Defense, Russian, has not said a fucking word about this. Dmitry Rogozin, who's part of the Duma, and he was the former head of Roscosmos, he said it's outrageous. This is our early warning system, and the US has commissioned a crook or something like that.
What terrorism does is that it's
hired a bandit.
It provokes them, because if we assume Russia's doing this slow and steady burn, casualty averse, slow and steady burn in Ukraine, doing these extreme pinpricks, can provoke Russia to try and get them to act more aggressively. Either less discriminate bombing campaigns that Ukraine can use as kind of propaganda, with Putin's bombing civilians deliberately kind of thing, or just to provoke Russia into attacking more aggressively and taking more casualties, just feeling pressured to act more aggressively. I think so. I would not call these terrorists
to bring in more
Ukraine, right? So from the Ukrainian perspective, I would not be dismissive. They don't look good for Ukraine, because it's like, you're using the limited resources you have on something that's irrelevant to the conflict itself. But on the other hand, I wouldn't call it a useless or dumb strategy either. It's a well thought out.
But you had even some rational Westerners saying, we don't want Russia to be blind. Like we want Russia to be able to detect incoming nuclear ICBMs, because it's in the best interest of humanity if there's a clear understanding, and there's no chance for, oh shit, we see these missiles, but are they nuclear or not? You know what I'm saying?
The problem with these early warning systems, so it's not that they're necessarily blind. What happens is that they use systems that, one, give less warning, and also have more fault. Because if you use a radar system beyond the scope of what it's intended for, it might still detect, incoming an incoming attack. But what also happens is you might have an increase in false positives. So if Russia has these gaps and has to fill those gaps with equipment
just as dangerous,
beyond the war, out in a way that voids the warranty, as the saying goes, that makes Russia's early warning system less reliable and increases the risk of them thinking there's a nuclear attack when there isn't. And so I would say Western countries actually have a legitimate reason to be worried if Russia has to even temporarily resort to less reliable early warning systems to plug these gaps. Because that's not good for, especially how jumpy everyone is. Because you had a couple of points in the Cold War when it came very close to someone pushing the red button because they had a false positive. You had a bird pooped on the radar type of thing happen. And now everybody's so jumpy. It's just like, are you going to have someone say, well, I think this is a false positive? I think there's that risk of it happening. So people have reason to worry.
Let me just combine that with something, because that's why I'm a little bit worried, not just the false positive, but also there was this Wall Street Journal exclusive with Pentagon unnamed US officials that says America is getting ready for space warfare. Pentagon officials opened up about the threats from China and Russia. So a bundled threat. But, if you combine that with hitting really, really long distance early warning radars, yeah, it's safe to say I'm concerned. Not concerned at anything else, at this point about the Ukraine conflict, but this is.
I don't think the USA is seeking out a nuclear conflict or even wants an increased risk of nuclear conflict because, I will preface this by saying I don't personally believe in mutually assured destruction. That's what's marketed to people, and I think it's most comforting. Like, it would be bad for everybody. I do think governments, regardless of what they publicly say, they always strive to have a sufficient advantage to win a nuclear exchange. And by win, I mean preserve your own population and infrastructure just enough so you can crawl back from a nuclear strike while your adversary is just erased. That's the worst case
That's
scenario.
scary.
That is scary, but it's the worst case scenario. I think every major nuclear power, I think right now there's just two countries on that list, Russia and the USA. They have the sufficiently large nuclear arsenals to think that way, but I think they both think, okay, do I have the advantage? Would I win or would they win? I think right now it's pretty clear that there is a missile gap in Russia's favor because the USA could escalate things in the ways that they have not. Because right now our nukes are in Germany, and that's the farthest east. They haven't done anything particularly inflammatory, like move them to Poland. Poland's asked for nukes. Because Russia.
Sikorsky did more precisely because Sikorsky is the mad dog there. He's the foreign minister.
Yes, yeah. Because Putin made the big spectacle of they moved medium range nukes into Belarus, and the USA did not, because the logical tit for tat in that situation would have been for the USA to move nukes into Poland. They did not. So that to me suggests that there is a missile gap. The USA knows there's a missile gap. So on that particular front, doesn't want to push the issue. So that's my.
But we see, the collapse of the Ukrainian project, right? So the war on the, in Ukraine itself is not going the U.S. way. Obviously, the economic war did not go the U.S. way. And so they're shifting to this asymmetric warfare kind of posturing. And they're talking about just, using long-range weapons to antagonize Russia. And they're just going to, the space weapons, attacking the nuclear infrastructure of Russia. So this is all asymmetric warfare designed to make sure Russia doesn't get the big, huge W that they would otherwise get. And so, but at the same time, they're just, the West is accepting the reality that what they wanted to accomplish isn't going to happen. But I wanted to pivot to Israel because Israel is also kind of a distraction for the West. It's like they don't really want this to happen right now. They want to invest all of their resources in, containing China and in bringing down the economic, behemoth that is China, and containing it, constraining it, really just destroying it if they could. And, Israel is an unwanted distraction, just like Ukraine has become an unwanted distraction. So what do you guys think are the main dynamics at play? I mean, again, it just seems that Netanyahu, they want to make him the scapegoat. They want to blame him for all the problems. They want him out. They want to put somebody in, and then they can just kind of do a reset. They can dictate the policies that Israel is going to, employ, which would be a lot less aggressive, right? Go back to the fake pursuit of the two-state, go back to how it was before October the 7th. Because guess what? The U.S. doesn't mind if more October 7th happen. Like, we don't care if 1,000, settlers die or get, we don't really care about that. It's in our interest to, to just throw water on the flames that are really getting higher over there. So
This
obviously Netanyahu is kind of representative of his people with his attitudes, and he doesn't want to leave. And so, like, how do you guys see that? Like, am I off base in my analysis, or you guys agree?
Okay, let's start with Netanyahu, because I think Borrell recently said that he refused, the EU foreign policy guy said he refuses to call it Israel anymore. He's going to call it the Netanyahu government. So he also wants to separate the entity and this guy and his actions. It's all him. He's the bad guy, which is obviously patently ridiculous. But the last thing that happened, I mean, they have been ordered by the ICJ to halt the offensive in Rafah, and they are now completely a pariah state, completely isolated. It's damaging Biden's re-election. It's damaging their what's left of their relations with the rest of the world, to just go in and basically massacre people at a camp, burning tents and all that. And they do this shit like
Ben, it was an accident.
No, it was a tragic mishap, is what Netanyahu said, because apparently they're blaming it on a piece of shrapnel or something which hit like a fuel tank, like maybe 100 meters away from the intended target, which is a big bad Hamas terrorist guy. But it's obviously oh, by the way, did you read that the pier that was the U.S. pier that was supposed to bring in aid? Well,
He's
they
bringing in weapons.
No, there was some choppy waters, Ian, and the water
broke
apart, and it came ashore in Ashdod, somewhere else in Israel. Like, thanks.
Okay, it's a different story. I was thinking some people did I think it was 2 days ago, there were some photos posted of it, and they were moving MRAPs and other obviously military gear through.
That's interesting. And it could have been sabotaged by, the Palestinians could have sabotaged it somehow in an operation. Yeah. But I'm sure it was bringing in weapons. But yeah, no, it got kind of destroyed, and so they're saying they're going to rebuild it and go back to bringing in humanitarian aid. But right now, yeah, it just came apart and it washed up on the shore.
But anyway, yeah, the offensive had not halted; it's not stopped, and now they're being protective, saying, "Well, the ICJ didn't stop the whole fucking offensive. Maybe they want something to do." It's ridiculous what they're doing, and they're in the corner. They actually are, and I don't see any good end here. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say, is the breaking up of the pier, has that been resolved by the fact that they're putting it together now 20 kilometers away on some shore where the Mediterranean's not so choppy, and then towing it out to add to the pier? Or is did this happen?
I don't know about this.
After they've changed their modus operandi? I don't know.
I don't know about this. I know this was a Gaza pier, so it connected. It was a long shit from the Gaza shore.
What it is a temporary construction, so it's going to be it's going to be, we have inclement weather conditions. You're going to have structures like that not work.
My understanding is too, the huge freighter comes in, and they offload it on this island, and then the materials offloaded on the island are loaded onto smaller ships that can only handle 5 containers, 3 containers. And then they go to the pier and they offload it at the pier. And then it's loaded onto trucks, which drive another 1,800, I think it's meters, to the shoreline. And then they offload it again. So it's a little bit of a misnomer, because you actually have to load it and offload it twice. More than double it. It's very inefficient. In other words, it's very transparent that this is just a hustle. This is a diversion.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same logic as IMEC, right? The Israel, Middle East, Europe economic corridor or something that Netanyahu drew on a map, which was the same as the Suez Canal, but you have to unload and load like 3 times.
Yeah, I thought about that earlier. Yeah.
Well, what it shows is how emasculated, and that's, I think, an appropriate word to use for this, emasculated the Biden administration is. Because, even Reagan, who is the hardcore Zionist who is a Hollywood actor, he made that, when he was upset with Israel being overly brutal, he picked up the phone and he said, just stop doing it. And he stopped doing it. But with Biden, it's just he's led around by the nose, and this, it doesn't look good to step a little, like you said, do this ridiculous, because you could just put American troops in Egypt, which is also an American ally, and just send convoys directly into Gaza if he wanted to, or just tell Israel to stop. Biden could do that, but he doesn't. So it looks really weak and ineffective.
When it comes to geopolitics, this is horrible to say, but other than this horrific Rafah massacre, what I think is more consequential is there was this dust-up at the border with Egyptian armed services. An officer died, and the initial initial Egyptian reports were that they weren't following orders from on high. And we don't know who started it, but sometimes people they just reach their limit and they had enough. And I know the 90 million Egyptians would be ready to go, but it's still Sisi. We know Sisi, and I wonder when it becomes untenable for him to continue doing fucking nothing. That could also become, even Erdogan was forced to actually stop all trade with Israel. It's basically at zero at this point. And he was good at doing both sides for a time, but even he couldn't do that after he lost a couple of local elections.
Huge strategic defeat for Israel. Because the October 7th attack itself, despite all of the hysteria, that the Palestinians are, cooking and beheading, all these Israeli babies, which was total nonsense.
Worse than Butcher,
Yeah. Aside from all the atrocity porn, it was a huge military blunder for Israel to have your security forces washed away like that. But, the 6-7 months of comically, like it's like absurd. It's it's asymmetric to the point of being ridiculous. Having basically 10-1 numerical superiority. Full air supremacy. Just unlimited firepower, and still floundering around for 7 months with no clear victory.
They're going into previously cleared areas, which is basically rubble, and they're still getting their asses handed to them right there. There's heaps of videos still popping up from underground, hand placing a mine on the fucking Merkava.
It's almost as if the Gazan resistance was expecting Israel to come in and invade, and they were ready for it. I mean,
by the way, the latest is, if you trust the big brain of who's that bitch who might be the VP of Trump, Nikki Haley, the former representative to the UN. According to her, this comes out today on the Times of Israel, the big Zion magazine. Visiting southern Israel, Nikki Haley blames Iran, Russia, and China for October 7th. So it's no longer even Hamas. No, it's the new axis of autocracy.
Let's pivot then to domestic political considerations. And I mean, what's going on with Trump? Because Nikki Haley did just endorse him. Of course, Lindsey Graham and all the right-wing warmongers are suddenly warming up to Trump, because there's a very, very high likelihood, it seems, that he's going to win the November election despite everything. And so that just brings up a lot of questions. Like I kind of gave Trump a pass for surrounding himself with these neocon warmongers, but he's not going to get a pass a second time. It's like I almost voted for Obama the first time, but there's no way in hell I was going to vote for Obama the second time, and I never did vote for him the first time. But I was just lazy.
Trump sold out. That's what happened. I think it's very clear.
That's what I'm
very
thinking.
clear.
That's
same as Johnson.
Now, the people that have always opposed Trump are going to call us stupid for ever thinking there was anything for him to sell out. But no, I think he could have gone a certain direction, and it wasn't clear to me that he was not going to go that direction. But it seems clearer and clearer now that he's not going to go that direction. He's going to go the selling out direction, which makes sense. I mean, he's got so much pressure on him with all these lawsuits.
The old Mossad quote, isn't
He's never had any principles, so that's the problem with Trump. He never had principles.
He's very pro-Israel. He seems principled pro-Israel, partly perhaps because of his son-in-law, and his son-in-law's business is invested in real estate in the illegal settlements. But he's always been, and his daughter, of course, converted to Judaism. So he's always been really tight with Israel. For sure. That's been one thing that has been consistent from day one. about Trump. That's maybe the only thing that's been consistent. I mean, he's been consistently kind of being nice to Russia too, is another kind of theme that, despite all kinds of pressure to do the opposite, he's maintained good rhetoric towards Russia, but maybe not in actions. Anyway, I'm rambling.
Well, here's the thing. So Trump's buddy with Israel, I wouldn't even call that a principle, because he's everybody seems to brain dump that he is a New York real estate mogul. And, let's be honest, the majority of real estate in New York, I mean, if you can look at it, it's not even a secret, is owned by New York Jews, who a lot of whom have Israeli passports. So it's just not an environment where you can sit there and say, screw Israel. You won't even survive for 5 seconds in the New York political and business sphere if you're
No. That's not true. We're a democracy, Ben. The mayor of New York has no, there's no influence in, there's no, rich billionaire people who support Israel would never use that leverage to interfere in the politics, Ian. That's not American. That's un-American. How dare you?
Even with Russia, too. I mean, up until 3-4 years ago, all American businessmen were, Russia friendly, because Russia is just a major economy, and so so when these guys try to look for the smoking gun in Trump's business record, well, look, he went to Moscow this one time. Well, can you show me an American billionaire who hasn't been to Moscow at some point?
Start with Bill Browder.
It's just like they've all been to Moscow, because Moscow is just a place that billionaires tend to go to at some point in their lives, in their business dealings. They own something in Russia, they have stock in some Russia-related company. All of them too. This whole Russia is this malign influence only started a few years ago.
It's almost as dumb as if you accuse somebody of being pro-China because you're doing business.
Because you had business interests in China. Exactly, it's the same concept.
Yeah, and with New York, I mean, again, it's he's a real estate guy. And the mantra is you never use your own money. So he has to go to investment bankers. And Jewish or not Jewish, they all support Israel. I mean, it's just a natural for them. There's a lot of money to be made. I mean, their portfolios have got, not only do they have real estate investments in them, but they have military industrial complex investments in them. Doesn't matter what religion you are, that's where the money is. And Rosalie and I inherited a little money from few stocks from a relative when she passed away, and it was Raytheon, and we just sold it immediately. And of course, we could have made a lot of money. Well, not a lot, but it wasn't that many shares. We could have made some money on it, but we talked it over. It took about 3 minutes. No, we're not gonna hold on to Raytheon shares. Screw that.
Yeah.
With those people, it's a different ball game.
Good on you. You have a clear conscience. But yeah, you could have made some money.
Yeah. So it pays off, doesn't pay off. But anyway, that's another factor to consider. And I wanted to make one other point about. Oh yeah, Trump and the libertarians. How about that?
Because they cheered for some of it and they booed for some other parts of it. It was a very.
That this? When was that? That was this weekend.
Yeah, very recently. Yeah, they booed him.
All of the Western headlines were the libertarian, freedom-loving people booing Trump. But if you actually watch some other segments, a lot of his messaging came positively across. Like he didn't want a CBD, central bank digital currency. You get the thing wrong, CBDC, I think. But there was a lot of it which got huge applause, and there was some of it that got big boos.
Yeah.
Can I just say, I'm no longer invested in American politics. I really am not. But I'd like to apologize for hoping for a Trump win for a single reason, other than being a chaos bomb. Who knows what he'll blow up? Is that the Eurocrats, these NATO-dominated bastards in Western Europe, they were scared of him. And by the way, that hasn't gone away. They are still concerned that Trump will come back, and then what the fuck will do? That is my only reason. I don't think he's a good guy or draining the swamp. All of that is, I'm with you there.
And you're right, Ben, because there's no honesty or integrity in any of this. Trump, Biden, any of those people, none.
None.
None
So
whatsoever.
what do you think is, because I think, you know, they don't want to roll out unpopular policies. Nobody wants to roll out unpopular policies before an election.
Except
But
for
after an
Sunak.
election, immediately they're going to start rolling these what are these unpopular policies that they're going to roll out? I'm thinking they're going to increase the trade war against China, and it's going to, you know, it's going to have some significant effects on our quality of life, our access to goods, kind of like during the COVID pandemic when, you know, there's so many things you couldn't get or it took forever to get to you. Everybody was out because of supply chain issues. I think that might come very shortly after the election's over, regardless of who wins, right? I don't
10
think
times
China,
as much.
What's that?
10 times what COVID was. Yeah, I think.
Yeah,
If they actually do the full sanction thing. Yeah, good.
But I don't think Trump is any better on China than Biden. And I think either way, there's going to be a pivot to China, and the establishment doesn't really care who their figurehead is, whether it's Biden or Trump. They're going to have the same policy that's not going to be good for the world or us, the American consumers.
All right, let me tell you about what this for the most part, what this election is. Who is going to own the Ukraine failure? Everything else you said is true, and that's why I'm going back to China. That's why I mentioned when you see a bipartisan delegation, that's something the Democrats and the Republicans completely agree upon, which is 80% of foreign policy, right? What the differences are: abortions, LGBTQ, social, cultural things. That's the show where you're supposed to get angry and hate the other guys. But when you actually see these things, like China, like Israel, I think Trump recently mentioned to his donors that he's going to not disperse. Let me just find it because it's he's going to crush the pro-Palestinian protests and deport the demonstrators. I don't know about the legality of deportation, but what I can tell for sure, one way or the other, is that a whole lot of censorship is definitely even more.
Carlo's like, that's what those camps are for.
I'm sorry about that. I got carried away that time with that comment.
No. I mean,
Rex
the camps
Night Trainer
at least exist on paper.
Yeah.
Oliver North was tasked with writing under Reagan, tasked with writing up a proposed plan using existing camps in Colorado, the ones that were used to train the Tibetan resistance against China, the ones that were used for other things too. I mean, for Central American and South American.
Yeah. But let's not get sidetracked down that rabbit hole. But it's true. It's true. That was the actual.
They're there. I mean, yeah.
And maybe they were the original Japanese prisoner of war camps as well.
Rex 84 nitrate. Okay, just look it up. Rex 84 nitrate.
But your general point was what, Ben? That they're not gonna. There's not a big difference between either figurehead.
I think that's perfectly obvious since Obama, to me. Well, maybe to most people, I hope. Yeah, I mean,
I think politically, and I don't know what he'll do when he's elected, but I think Trump, his vision on Ukraine, is that it's a losing proposition, and he'll get more votes if he pulls out, if he pretends he's going to pull out, or whatever political stance he's going to take right now. And that's obviously an opposition in a political rhetorical sense to the Biden administration.
Comparative to like a year ago, he's pretty quiet on Ukraine, which means, if this thing crumbles before November, he can ride right in and say, look what Biden did, even though he, through Johnson, okayed that 61 billion thing. He can still disown this quagmire.
Well, that's why he did, because the problem is the personal problem for Trump, and someone might have just directly told him this, that if that 61 billion was just caught in development hell, in Congress forever, and Ukraine crumbles, then it would be on Trump's head. He's the bad guy who stabbed Ukraine in the back, but he allowed it. But Trump gave his blessing to it. So if it passes anyway, like you said, he can say it was Biden's fault. But I think what's really happening here is that the powers that be are just betting on both horses. It's just betting on both horses at this point.
Yeah, that's what the quiet means on Trump's part when it comes to Ukraine. Not quiet on Israel, no fucking way.
Well, and I think even
quiet on Ukraine.
I think when it even just comes between the two candidates, Trump and Biden, Wall Street at this point has just decided to bet on both horses.
Yeah, even Biden is very like distancing himself from this whole thing. He wants it to be a European thing, not his thing. Even with the many threads of
I
investment.
still
and
struggle to see Biden lasting 4 more years. I mean, it's super tough as it is. So there might be, the convention. There might be some shenanigans going on at the convention. It might not even be an actual physical convention. It might be a virtual convention. And there could be some surprises as far as the ticket. And I mean, the Democrats are a private corporation. The Democrats can run whoever they want, however they want. They've had lawyers argue before a judge. We don't even have to have a vote. We can have a vote and not adhere to the vote. Like, we do what we want. And so the judge agreed. It's a party. It's a private political party. They don't have to do anything. So we'll see what happens.
I just want him to do at least 5 more blunders before he, collapses on stage and then the cadaver is actually a cadaver. Because yesterday, I think all 3 of you had Memorial Day weekend, right? Normandy. Memorial Day. And he went to Arlington Cemetery and already said that the United States basically saved Europe, saved the world, liberated Europe and saved the world. That's what the United States. I just wanted a little bit more of this before it's over. You wanted to make.
So it's not. So Normandy, the D-Day landing. So D-Day is. I just want to clarify. I mean, he mentioned D-Day as a separate, and I'm actually going to be interested to see what happens on June 6th. Is there going to be, are there anyone here want to make a bet on that? Like, is there even going to be a D-Day commemoration
in France? Well, I don't know, because he invited Macron, who's the head responsible for it, invited a Russian delegation without the president, and I don't know who the fuck would show up for that.
Well, it's because the problem with being too loud. Oh, here's Todd. The problem with being too loud about how good D-Day was because some of our allies actually are kind of sad and feel, the good guys lost World War II. When you're allies with Latvia and Estonia and Lithuania, the Baltic Tigers, you can't really sit there and say the Nazis were bad. It's not really a politically correct. They were misunderstood,
Let's talk about the. Yeah,
there's no victory. There's no Victory Day and Europe Day. I checked. There was not. I don't think even one Western country celebrated Victory in Europe Day.
No, that's the new Europe Day. They put some Europe shit in there and forgot the whole thing.
It is truly interesting that France asked for a Russian contingent without the president. I don't know who that's going to be.
I don't think that was Macron. That wasn't Macron, though. That was whoever the local.
Okay.
Am I wrong? I mean, am I wrong? Wasn't that local?
I read it as coming from the top of the French, from the Élysée Palace, but now I'm not sure because it wasn't this week. It was a while ago.
But for the historical context, the entire purpose of D-Day was not to defeat the Nazis. It was to make sure that the Soviet Union didn't defeat the Nazis all by themselves and have a larger sphere of influence in Western Europe. So it was about getting in there quick, getting to the front and meeting the Soviets before the Soviets were able to get any further into Western Europe than they were gonna. And that's why we go ahead.
I want to illustrate that, but you guys talked about the Baltic midgets. I want to get back to that before we end, but I found this picture. I think it's remarkable. It is the correct perspective of Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union. And people think, it was Nazi Germany. No, it was the whole of continental Europe, pretty much united, as it is today under NATO, going and basically disembowelling the country. And it was 3 years later, when Normandy happened, exactly as Billy Bob described, when, it looks like those damn Ruskies or the Soviets are not going to lose, and it looks like they're going to take Berlin. We have to save whatever we can in Western Europe to not go red, because we were prepared to go red all the way to Lisbon. So this whole thing that ever since then, the British and the US spouses about the anti-fascism, there was never a British or American anti-fascism. Never. They were completely happy going along with Hitler's invasion.
Yeah, no, Stalin asked for a Western Front, John, about 1942, not 1944. He was asking for years and years for an opening up of a Western Front, and it finally happened. But the impetus behind that was to make sure that the Soviet sphere of influence was as small as possible.
I mean, and it did. I mean, we do have to be fair here. The invasion of Normandy did shorten the war by 2
Yeah,
years.
of course it did. So did Lend-Lease. Not by a long shot,
Yeah.
not by long, but it did help. Of course it did.
Oh, and Ben, I just shared you a link. You should see it in the chat. Another, it's just related to the map you just shared. It's the second map. This was drawn by a Portuguese fascist in World War II. You can see it's kind of similar. I think it's actually a very interesting perspective of World War II. If you look at this map,
We'll bring it up momentarily. I have it. Shit, where the fuck are you guys? Sorry, I got mixed up with my windows here. And that's the map you're referring to, yeah.
Yeah, so this is the rules-based world order. This is the Guardian of Europe, as Burrell likes to say. You know,
and the big bad Red Star Cossack.
Yes, and you can see those, those Bolshevik-loving Brits on their island with the, with the glorious German U-boat fleet sinking all of their shipping, and you can see. You kind of see the passive aggressive portrayal of the Portuguese, because this was a Portuguese, can't remember his name. This is a Portuguese fascist. He's upset Portugal wasn't contributing more to the war efforts. That's why the Portuguese guy is kind of staring off into the sunset, but everybody else is.
I like the Baltics.
Yes, and Ukrainians too. Look at their Ukrainians are victims. Ukrainian.
Oh, yeah, I see it.
So Baltic and Ukrainian victims. Yes.
It was a 3 million man invasion. It was the largest land invasion in the history of the known universe.
Yes.
And, it's everybody was participating, like Ian is pointing out. Finland is an interesting, example of how that worked out. So Finland had a communist revolution that the Finnish bourgeoisie were able to put down because they brought in a bunch of German troops. So German troops landed in Finland to put down a socialist revolution. And then the bourgeoisie, they actually made a German citizen their king. So Finland had the head of their government was a German citizen. I mean, it's just total. This just shows how the class struggle works. And so the Finnish bourgeoisie had a German king. Mannerheim essentially, though, ran the government, and he was like a Finnish general, a military guy, part of the aristocracy, part of the bourgeoisie. And of course, he aligned himself with Hitler. He celebrated Hitler's birthday, the two of them. And then in the middle of the war, when people realized that the Germans weren't going to win, the West just let Finland switch sides. And so they just switched sides in the middle of the war. No harm, no foul. There's no sense you guys going down with Germany. We're going to blame all this on Hitler. All this will be Hitler's fault. Just switch sides. And
Finland, what Finland did was they kind of stabs their German allies in the back. If you can look at the Lapland War, Stalin basically flat out told the Finns, the German army, you need to harass.
They stabbed all of their friends in their back. They're maybe better than the Ukrainians at that.
Well, I mean, imagine fighting side by side with someone for 2 years at that point. This is 1944. Yeah, so more than 2 years. And then just like, sorry, we're switching sides and just stabbing in the back. It shows the mentality, though. It's a very self-serving mentality. Because they were talking about the big bad Russians and the big bad, Georgian guy with his pipe tells Finland, well, you know what? You're on my side now. You're going to attack those Germans, and they did. So
I want to add one more point because so Norway, they say, we were different, all of that, but they had a defense minister called Vidkun Quisling, which is where the name the Quisling Lord comes from. The arch fucking corroborator.
No
but
kidding.
Yeah, that's where that comes from. And there was no worse than the three Baltic midgets, which, had a colorful history before that. But, the middle one, I think the middle one's Lithuania. No, Latvia is the middle one. The southern one is Lithuania, which is where Kaja Kallas is, the girl who had a dream of destroying Russia that we saw previously. And the foreign minister is a second, or I think maybe third generation career politician. He's called Gabrielius Landsbergis. And if you go back 3 generations, it was a Nazi protectorate, the only one that was marked Judenfrei. So completely eradicated the Jews. So that kind of gives you a hint where he comes from. But he is let's see what you think about what his comments mean. Because,
the biggest problem of almost all the questions that we are solving is our fear. That we're afraid of what Russia might think, of how Russia might react, how Russia might act. And at this point, our fear looks like it's an invitation. Not only an invitation to act more fiercely in Ukraine, with heinous attacks against civilian objects, destroyed supermarkets, killed children and women and innocent people, but also an invitation to act in our countries. And we're talking about hybrid activity in Baltic region, in Poland, in other countries, but it's going beyond that. And we know that Russia has intentions to act kinetically, meaning organize diversions, organize even what could be called terrorist acts within NATO countries. And it only acts so because it feels that it's invited, because it can calculate that we're not going to react in any meaningful way. And the way how to react to Russia's aggression in Ukraine and also in our countries is to support Ukraine, is to allow Ukraine to use the weapons that they already have the way that they need to use them. That is how you manage escalation, not by de-escalating, but allowing Ukraine to fight back and to win the war. This is
that's just the current line. But I mean,
which country is this guy from again?
Lithuanian foreign minister.
Lithuania, okay. You know what the Baltics did in the Russian Civil War, actually? Near the end of the Russian Civil War, between Reds and Whites, the Whites have been pushed into Crimea. They've been basically pushed out into all the, the peripheral regions of the former Russian Empire. So, and this happened specifically in not Lithuania, I think this was in Estonia, but there was a White army contingent there. And at this point, it's very obvious the Bolsheviks were going to win. The Reds were going to win. So what the Estonians did was they rounded up this White army group. They took their weapons, they took their winter clothes, and left them to freeze to death in the snow. And the reason they did that, and these were their allies, these were their partners. The reason they did this is because they realized, oh shit, the communists are going to win, and wanted to win favor with the powers that be in Moscow. So it shows you despite all the rhetoric about, we'll fight to the death against Russia, in the bat of an eye, they will switch sides if it doesn't go that way.
Yeah, they weren't there for the revolution. They were there for some gain. And immediately as 1989 came around, they became the fervent ally of the West and the Western way of things. And that, I think, is, oh shit, what if it happens again? We wanted to take Russia, and what if it fucking wins again? That's what I read from his fearful words. Well, he's not talking.
I would not want to be an American or British soldier in Poland or the Baltics. I mean, seriously, because I mean, it's a cool place. There's local girls. It's I'm sure it's a good pub culture. You can drink, have fun. But if there's an actual war, and it became clear that the NATO side was losing, assuming there wasn't just a nuclear holocaust. It was very clear that the NATO was losing side. I don't think any of our friends in the Baltics would stay our friends if it became very clear that Russia was winning. I think it would just not be healthy to be an American soldier there if that happened.
Probably, but Landsbergis and his ilk would be out on his ass. So would Kaja Kallas, I think.
So all the talk about history that we were discussing made me want to say a few things about Stalin and his foresight. Back in 1933 or 32, he said we have about 10 years to prepare for a Western invasion because it's just inevitable. And he was very prescient, and he did. He moved all the heavy industry to the Urals, and you can actually hear a recording of Hitler. I'm pretty sure it's authentic. And he's talking to Mannerheim. I think it's Hitler's birthday. He's in Finland talking to Mannerheim, and he's lamenting the fact that he never imagined that the Soviets could produce 30,000 tanks. And so, while he was trying to drive on Moscow and the German army was getting its guts torn out, he was pretty shocked because all the West thought it was going to be a cakewalk to Moscow. But Stalin had prepared, and that's why we love him.
Not just why we love him. By the way, the end of the quote is they will destroy us if we don't make in 10 years the amount of progress that the West did 100 years. They will destroy us if we don't do this. Yeah, it was absolutely
and do it quickly. Yeah, but there's a lot of revisionism. There's a lot of people with a lot of really stupid thoughts about history. and it's frustrating because history is pretty clear when you look with, through the lens of class struggle and class analysis, and you understand the ideologies of the capitalists, the ideologies of socialism, and how that plays out. Like, everything just is pretty fucking clear, and most people are so fucking confused. That's not helpful to the discussion, but
I don't blame them. They never actually interacted with history.
True.
Like Timothy Snyder never did. That's for sure. Sorry, Yale
and
historian.
he probably knows better. I mean, his book was nothing but a lie after a lie, and it gets promoted as the #1 bestseller, and it just rots people's brains. But that's that experiment we were talking about before the show, where it's we're just gonna propagandize everybody and see how it works out, and hope it doesn't end the species. But okay, guys, an hour and a half. We have done an hour and a half guestless, but we don't need no guests. We've got a good core panel here.
Let's apologize, because today, I think for different reasons, we were all a bit low energy. So sorry if it wasn't as engaging as it usually is, but I hope we managed to get some info across. Go ahead.
I do want to introduce one thing. Believe me, it's innocent. It's not flammable or whatever. Hold on. Rosalie moved it. I got to go pull it out.
Okay.
Go ahead.
We'll wait. I want to take this time to thank all of our viewers. John was a new viewer, and I in my what way is that? It's like a real I have a real know-it-all way of explaining things, and so I apologize for that. But we appreciate our new viewers and our regular viewers
and the old one,
and that goes on in the chat. So what did you get us, Carlo?
I've got there's a name that's, when we talk about the Middle East, there's a name that's not mentioned in everything I'm seeing in the media and in the alternative media and in the articles I'm reading, and that's
who's left out.
You guys may know him, Kalius Gulbenkian. Are you familiar with him?
Unfortunately, I'm not.
I'm just going to read the first paragraph here from Wikipedia. It's years ago I worked on a piece, and it was heavily based on Sykes-Picot. So that's why I know about him. And Kalius Sarkis Gulbenkian. He lived from the 23rd of March 1869 to the 20th of July 1955. Nicknamed Mr. 5%, was a British Armenian businessman and philanthropist. He played a major role in making the petroleum reserves of the Middle East available to Western development, and is credited with being the first person to exploit Iraqi oil. Gulbenkian traveled extensively and lived in a number of cities, including Istanbul, London, Paris, and Lisbon. And it's just that he's extremely important. I think he still has, even though he's long dead, he possessed the largest collection of art in the world at the time, and was one of the world's richest men, because he got 5% of all of these oil deals. And so he's the guy that went with the grease pencil and said, this is Syria, this is Iraq, this is Iran.
Nice straight lines everywhere.
Yeah. So, I just thought I'd mention his name.
No, a name that was good to know and read up on. Yeah.
Those of us that live in the West, though, know that rich people don't abuse their influence. So we still have a democracy, and it's totally legit, and it's not influenced, disproportionately by wealthy billionaires. We promise. So I guess on that cynical note, we will reconvene Friday, unless somebody has some. Okay. All right, guys. Thank you so much. We will see you next Friday. See you then. Bye.